Hello guys, today in our new video we are going to talk about reinforced concrete design. Okay, reinforced concrete design. Here we are going to study how to distribute the load on our structure before the phase preceding the design, so we'll be able to come out with the load, the final load, for example, that is applied on our beam. For example, in the sake of this exercise, we are going to analyze the beam 2, which is from the span, from year to year. Okay, so what do we need to know before the design itself? You have to determine the P, either the P ultimate or the Pser, which is the P at the serviceability limit, or the P ultimate. So the P here is actually the load that is being applied on our various structural elements in terms of, for example, if it's on beam, it will be in kilonewton per meter. Okay, so what do we have to know before starting? We have to know the unit load or the self weight of each of our element. That's why we'll be talking about the load inventory. Okay, so what we have to know is if our structural element here, our beam here, is carrying a wall, is it carrying a wall or not? Is it carrying a slab or not? Because these two blue arrow is showing you that this beam too, from year to year, like the span of the kitchen here, is actually carrying a slab. That's why it's oriented, it's a one-way slab. Okay, so you have to know if your beam is carrying a slab, your beam is carrying a wall, before make the load inventory for that specific beam. Okay, so I've given already the self weight of the various elements. If we will be working with block 15 by 20 by 30. The self weight is 2.08 kilonewton per meter square according to Bael. Then we will have also the plaster at the thickness of 1.5 centimeter. That's the self weight. So these are the self weight. The mortar here will be 0.22 kilonewton per meter square. Remark that most of them are in kilonewton per meter square. Okay, so the mortar is for a thickness of 1 centimeter. The ties is a thickness of 1 centimeter, is also 0.22 kilonewton per meter square. And then we have the reinforced concrete. The unit weight of the reinforced concrete is 25 kilonewton per meter cube. Okay, and then we also have this man, the ribbit slab. The ribbit slab is equal to 2.85 kilonewton per meter cube. Okay, for a ribbit slab, because we are not going to use reinforced concrete slab, we are going to work with ribbit slab. Okay, so concerning the live load, because these are dead load or permanent load, so concerning the live load, for a dwelling we have 1.5 kilonewton per meter square. For a corridor or stairs we have 2.5 kilonewton per meter square, and veranda you have 3.5 kilonewton per meter square. This video was made to actually help some people that has been asking, what about the load distribution? How do we get the load distribution? You can check it there. So G will be our permanent load, Q will be taken as our life load. Okay, this is our distribution plan. This is a section of our building, is just a G+1. This section view actually show us just the height of our various wall. Okay, and here we have the distribution plan showing which room, showing the names of the various room, and also if the beams are carrying walls or not. Okay, we also have the length of our various span. Okay, so let's fall into calculation to shortcut the video, or in other words, to reduce the time of the video. I decided to make some calculation because it could have been so long. Okay, so I will start. Normally I'm supposed to make it in minimum of 3 category, right? I'm supposed to make the inventory load for the walls aside, make the inventory load for the slab if my beam is carrying a slab, and then make the inventory load for the self weight of that beam. Okay, as you can see, according to reinforced concrete slab, I put it G6. It represents the self weight of the reinforced concrete. Okay, and later on I will be able to find this G1, G2, G3 through the calculation for each of those elements. So concerning the wall, okay, we can start here. We started here by the one of the wall. So finding the G1, the G1, which is the permanent load of the wall, actually knowing the height of our wall, 3 meter high, we will have the self weight of our wall, you see, times the length of the beam, okay, the length of the beam, because we are analyzing this beam, times the length of the beam times the height of the wall divided by the length of the beam. This is the numerical application. We'll be having 2.08, which is the self weight of the wall, okay, times 4, which is the length of the beam. This beam is of spans 4 meters, so times 3 the height of the wall divided by 4, so we'll have 6.24 kilonewton per meter. Okay, the answer here is in kilonewton because we are on beam. It's when usually we are sending the load directly, right, and it's also a uniform distributed load. But when we are sending the load directly to our column, we usually convert directly to kilonewton. Okay, now we find G2. G2 here represent the permanent load exerted by the plaster on the wall. Okay, that's why I say there is a category of the load, the inventory of the load, just that the board is small and the video might look long. So there is a inventory load. Normally for the wall, you highlight, you list all the elements that is being on the wall, whether there is plaster, mortar, tiles on the wall. You put a section wall, you put the self weight of the wall, you put mortar, you put plaster, you put tiles if there are tiles on the wall, and then you do the same for slab. If your slab has plaster, you mention it, the self weight of your plaster, the the load applied by the tiles on your plaster if they have it, or even the staff. Okay, so G2 now is the permanent load exerted by the plaster on the wall. Okay, because you realize that I multiply here again by the height of the wall. Okay, so I take the self weight now for the plaster on the wall. I took a thickness of 2.5 centimeter. Okay, so a thickness of 2.5 centimeter, I will convert this plaster, which has a thickness of 0.33 kilonewton per meter square, to the one of a 2.5 centimeter. You can make the calculation, you obtain 0.55 kilonewton times 2. This times 2 is actually showing that the plaster is on both sides of the wall, either external or internal. Okay, the plaster is on both sides of the wall. That's why I multiply times 2, and then I simply make times length of the beam times height of the wall divided by length of the beam. I obtain the answer of 3.3 kilonewton per meter. Now G3 of the wall again. G3 represent the permanent load exerted by the mortar on the wall. We already have the self weight of the mortar, which is 0.22 kilonewton per meter square. Okay, so the self weight 0.22 will be multiplied times length of the beam again times height of the wall divided by length of the beam. Okay, so you have 0.66 kilonewton per meter. Okay, some other people would directly take it times height of the wall, because as you can see, every time the length of the beam is being cancelled. This is just to ease your understanding, for you to understand where actually the uniform load will be coming out from. Okay, because I'm sure if I just wrote height of times height of the wall, some of us might feel confused. Okay, so now we go to G4. G4 again is for the wall, the tiles of the wall. Remember, beam 2 is actually separating the kitchen and the veranda, and inside the kitchen we apply tiles. Okay, so one side of the wall will be having the tiles. So we are looking for G4 of the tiles of 1 centimeter thick. The self weight is 0.22. So making the calculation again, self weight times length of the beam times height of the wall divided by length of the beam, will obtain 0.66 kilonewton per meter. Okay, per meter. So now let's fall into G5. G5 here, we'll first of all skip the self weight of the beam. Okay, that's reinforced, it's in reinforced concrete. Okay, so we'll go to the ribbit slab. Since it's a one-way slab, okay, the self weight of the ribbit slab is 2.85 kilonewton per meter square. If you look into your Bael code, you might have it, but know that the value might change from Bael or to the norm française, or even to slightly change. It's not that big. It might slightly change from the Bael to norm français or to Eurocode. Okay, so even to the British standard. Okay, so this is the self weight of the slab. Okay, so we'll find the self weight 51 G51 for this part. Okay, for the kitchen part. what happen is that we take the self weight times length of the beam again times width of the room divided by length of the beam. Now this width of the room here represent only half of this slab, okay, this part up here, okay, this upper part, just half of this slab is being carrying, the load of half of this slab is carrying by B2 because the other half is being carried by this beam 3, okay. So the width of the room that I put in the formula, width of the room, as you can see here, represent half of this 3 meter. That's why you are seeing 2.85 times 4 times 1.5 divided by 4, which is gonna give 4.228 kilonewton per meter, okay. Now we find G52, that's for the veranda, okay. G52, same thing, self weight of the ribbit slide times length of the beam times width of the room. The room here, normally I'm supposed to move V to mean V here, so that you understand that I mean for the veranda, okay. So the width of the veranda now is 0.5 because we are still in the same scenario, okay. We have half of this slab, okay, half of the slab of the veranda which is being carried, his load, half of his load is carried by this beam 2, the other half is carried by this beam 1, okay. That's why we divide the width of the veranda by 2. That's why you are seeing 0.5 here, okay. So that's what represent the width of the veranda in this scenario, okay. So you make the mathematics and you will see 1.43 kilonewton. Some value are slightly rounding up, okay. So 1.43 kilonewton per meter. Now let's find cure. Normally I made some changes here. I was supposed to go here, but okay, let's first of all explain here. So we'll have to our G second. I did not organize the work properly. Our G second here represent what? Plaster. The permanent load of the plaster now apply on the slab. That's what I call G second, G prime, okay. G second, G2 prime, okay. G2 prime is the permanent load of the plaster apply on what? On my slab, okay. So that's why I say we have 3 categories at least, knowing that our beam is carrying a slab, a wall, and a self weight, okay. So now here, this self load, this permanent load here are the one carrying by the slab itself. So G2 prime will be equal to self load of the plaster times what? Times length of the beam divided by width of the kitchen, as you can see here, divided by times width of the kitchen divided by length of the beam. So the self weight of the plaster apply on this thing, on the slab, is simply equal to 0.33 kilonewton because the underbeneath plaster is of a thickness 1.5 centimeter, okay. We are working with 1.5 centimeter thick, so it's gonna give 0.5 kilonewton per meter. That's the under part of your slab, to make it neat or clean or aesthetic, okay. We always put plaster down before even come applying stuff or pen, depending on the client, okay. So now G prime 3, okay, which represent the permanent load of the mortar apply on what? On your slab again. All that prime here are for the slab, the load apply on the slab. So this G3 prime here is the self weight of the mortar times length of the beam times width of the kitchen again, divided by length of the beam. This one is for mortar. The self weight of the mortar is 0.22. Why mortar here? Because we are going to put tiles on the upper part of our slab, the place where we are usually working, all right. The upper part of our slab, we are going to put tiles there. See, that's why we are putting mortar. We cannot put tiles without mortar, okay. So it will not hold, okay. So that's the answer, 0.33 kilonewton per meter. Now we have G2 prime or G2 second, okay, is actually representing again the permanent load applied by the plaster now on this other room, okay, because remember half of this slab is being carried by this load and half of this other slab is being carried still by this beam. So we have to calculate for half of this slab here and half of that other external slab. That's why we have them twice there, okay. So we have G prime 2 which is for the which is for the, sorry for the noise, G prime prime 2, which is for the plaster, is gonna give 0.33. We already know 1.5 centimeter thick times 4 times 0.5, which represent the width of our veranda. Okay, 0.5. We divided the width of our veranda by 2 because only half of his load is being sent on beam 2. Okay, so now it's gonna give us 0.165. Okay, now we find G3 prime prime, G3 prime prime, which is going to be the load of the mortar apply on what, on that slab, of what, of the veranda. Now at the same thing as the previous case, so we will just have 0.22 kilonewton times 0.5 because we have both veranda and kitchen. Okay, so that's why we'll be doing times 2 times 2 times 2. Normally that's where the table end. Let me just copy the value now so that I can erase this part. I will just copy some of those answer here. G1 is equal to 6.24 kilonewton, okay, per meter. Then we have G2 is equal to 3.3 kilonewton per meter. Okay, we have also G3 is equal to 0.66 kilonewton per meter. Okay, then we have G4. G4 is equal to 0.66 kilonewton per meter. Then we have G51, okay, which is equal to what? Is equal to 4.28 kilonewton per meter. Okay, so we have G51. Now we have this other part of the board free. Now we'll be calculating now G4 of the ties. Okay, because we are on the slab. Okay, G4 prime prime. Okay, which is going to be the self weight of the ties times length of the beam times width of the room. I will start with the kitchen, the width of the kitchen room. Okay, of the kitchen room divide by length of the beam. Okay, in human application, ties will be 0.22. Okay, times 4 times the width of the kitchen, which is going to give 1.5 divided by 4. Okay, you have 0.22 times 1.5, 0.22 times 0.22 times 1.5, 0.33. Okay, 0.33 kilonewton per meter. This G4 prime prime. Okay, this for the ties apply on this half part of the slab of the kitchen. Now we're going to calculate G4 prime prime of the veranda. Okay, it's gonna be 0.22. Okay, times is the same formula, length times width. So we'll just put the numerical application times 4 times 0.5. Okay, divide by 4. So it's gonna give us, let me check, I think I made the calculation already. It's gonna give us 0.22 times 0.5, 0.11 kilonewton per meter. Okay, that's G4. This for the ties. Okay, for the ties on on slab. Okay, now we have what again? We have now the G6, which is the reinforced concrete, the self weight. We'll find the self weight of this beam. Okay, we'll find the self weight. G6 now will be equal to what? It will be equal to the self weight of reinforced concrete times length times the cross section of our beam. Okay, I did not put the cross section. Let's just assume that our cross section is 40 centimeter by 20 centimeter. Okay, let's just assume that this is our cross section 40 by 20. So we'll be having times the cross section, that's 0.2 times 0.4. Okay, it's gonna give us 25 times 0.2 times 0.4 is gonna give us 2 kilonewton. Okay, 2 kilonewton per meter. That's the self weight of our reinforced concrete beam. Okay, so now we have all the load, both for the plaster, mortar, and even tiles, apply both on the wall and the slab. And we also have the self weight of our reinforced concrete beam. We always find its value, okay, to know the final load that is being applied on the beam. Now, if we are working at the serviceability limit, we just have to sum. Okay, I did not explain the one of this cure. Okay, the life load. Let me just go to the life load. Okay, so this G52 here was simple. What it was simple, the rebuild slab, the permanent load of the rebuild slab apply on what, on the veranda. Okay, I explained it for previously. So cure 1 1, which represent, because I call the life load cure. Okay, cure 1 1, which represent the life load of the life load apply on each of this room. Okay, because the other element like wall or column or wall, column, right, or beam does not have life load. So it's only the space in your structure, a specific place in your structure most of the time that have life load. So you have the self weight of the room, okay, which is the kitchen in this case, times length of the beam times width of the kitchen, right? Width of the kitchen divided by length of the beam. That's why you have 1.5 kilonewton here, as you can see, for a dwelling. Okay, which is dwelling here is to generalize whether it's room or kitchen or parlor. Okay, you take 1.5 kilonewton per meter square. Okay, so you take 1.5 kilonewton times 4 times 1.5 divided by 4, it gives you 2.25 kilonewton per meter. That's the life load for the kitchen. This half, remember, is only half of the life load of this slab that is being sent on beam 2. Okay, that's why we multiply by 1.5 here. Now for the other part of the slab, that's the veranda, the half of the slab of the veranda, also we do the same. We take now the life load, the self weight of the life load for the veranda will be different. As you can see, veranda has a life load of 3.5 kilonewton per meter square. Okay, so we take that life load times what, times length of the beam again, times width of the veranda. Here is supposed to be V. Okay, width of the veranda, divided by length of the beam. That's 3.5 times 0.5 directly, because the 4 will cancel. You will have 1.75 kilonewton per meter. That's all about the load. We have made the load inventory for this beam 2. We have calculated all the permanent load applied on beam 2 and all the live load applied on beam 2. Now, how we have to compile all of them. Okay, and depending on the situation, whether it's serviceability limit or ultimate limit state, okay, we'll know how to continue from there. So now we have let me just copy the value also of G4 prime. So G4 prime 1, okay, let me call it G4 prime 1, is equal to 0.33 kilonewton per meter. Okay, then we'll have G4 prime okay, is equal to 2. I mistakenly call it G4 prime. Okay, so let me just put 1 and 2 to say for this part and the other part. Okay, then we'll be having 0.11 kilonewton per meter. Okay, Then we have the self weight G6 of the reinforced concrete, that's 2 kilonewton per meter. Okay. Now, to obtain the final G, the final permanent load apply on our beam, we write G is equal to what? The summation of all those G, okay, which is equal to G1 plus G2 plus G3 plus G4 plus G5 plus G6, okay, plus G1 prime plus G2 prime plus G3 prime plus G3 prime prime, okay, plus G4 prime prime 1 plus G4 prime prime 2, okay, plus G1 prime prime plus G2 prime prime, okay. So we'll sum all the value of the G that we have obtained so far to have the final G, okay. So making the calculation now, we obtain G is equal to what? We just have to sum them. 6.2 plus 3.3 plus 0.66 plus 0.66 again plus 4.28 plus 0.33 plus 0.11 plus 2 plus 1.43, okay, equal plus 0.5 equal plus 0.33 plus 0.165 plus 0.11, okay. So we are about 20 point 20.0 20.075, that's 20.1 kilonewton per meter, okay. I'm not sure the computation was well done, but if it's well done, this one, because I will not check it back, we don't have enough time, okay. So you will make the computation to ensure that it's 20 kilonewton, because the aim is for you to understand how we go about it, okay. The principle of calculation, that's the most important, okay. So now to have the cure, now we'll have cure is equal to what? Cure is equal to cure 11. So we'll have cure 11 plus cure 12, okay. Okay, so this is how we'll get our cure 11 plus cure 12, okay. So we'll be having 2.25 plus 1.75, okay. So it's gonna give 4 kilonewton per meter, 4 kilonewton per meter, okay. Now to have the load have been applied on beam 2, okay, at the serviceability limit, you call it Pser, okay. At the serviceability limit, it will simply be equal to G plus cure, okay. So at the serviceability limit, it will be equal to what? We don't have enough space, so we have 20.1 plus 4 kilonewton, that's 24 kilonewton, 24 kilonewton point 1 per meter okay. So we will have 24.1 kilonewton per meter, that's the P, the load that is being applied on this our beam 2, okay. Now if we are to have it at the ultimate limit state, okay, P ultimate will be equal to what? 1.35. we'll be seeing the safety coefficient appearing 1.35 G plus 1.5 Q, okay. That's the formula. So let me just erase here. We'll be having 1.35 times 20.1 is equal to 27 is equal to 27. So P ultimate will be equal to 27.12, okay, plus 4 times 1.5 is equal to 6 kilonewton. So at the end of the day, we'll be having 6 kilonewton plus 27.12, okay. So we'll be having 33.12 kilonewton per meter, okay. This our P at the ultimate limit state, okay. As you can see, the P at the ultimate limit state is greater than the P at the serviceability limit state. At the serviceability limit state, what is why are we analyzing at the serviceability state? Because we consider usually that cracks are harmful, okay. Cracks are harmful, and we try to minimize analyzing at the serviceability limit state. We mostly try to minimize as much as possible the cracks on our structure, okay. So at the ultimate limit state, cracks are not harmful, okay. So we analyze our building in such a way that even when they are cracked, the building was not even when the building will reach its serviceability limit, like we'll be seeing cracks, the building will not collapse. That's why we overload our building at the ultimate limit state. Before analyzing, we overload it. That's why most of our building, if they are built by engineer, okay, they will be safe, because if they have mostly we analyze it at the ultimate limit state, okay. If you have learned something new, if you enjoy the video, don't forget to share, comment, leave a comment, always a comment, and subscribe to the channel if you are first time. Thank you very much. See you.